Right, and welcome to another Data and API show. We are ecstatic to have you with us here today. I am joined again, and probably will be quite often, by our newest member of the team, Anjana. How are you doing today?
Hello. Doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing good. Your background, the window behind you, looks about 100% sunnier than where I'm currently at. So that's
Well,
nice.
don't let it fool you because yesterday it was really gray and rainy, but today the sun is shining, so I'll take it. Yeah.
I'll take it. Gotta take it when the sun shines. All right, yeah.
hmm
So as most of you may be aware or not, we are actually coming to you from the virtual land because we are recording today's episode ahead of time. But don't feel like you're alone. We are right there in the chat. So if you have any questions, hit us up in chat, and one of us will try to do our best to answer those and be able to help you out with whatever questions you might have. So with that being said, we're not going to be checking on chat in today's show, but we will be checking on chat during the actual premiere of this episode. And a couple of housekeeping points. Hasura CFPs still open. So if you want to talk about Hasura, if you want to show us what it is you're building with Hasura, I got to work on that. Then let us know. CFPs are open.
Yeah, and
Community
if you
call.
are,
Yeah.
oh, I was just going to say, if you are, there's something that you think you might want to talk about, but you're not quite sure, and you want some feedback, hit us up.
Yeah. Yeah. Anjana actually gave us internally the other day a CFP workshop, which was fantastic. Like, it was all about how to compose a good CFP, put yourself in the learner perspective, all these kind of pieces. Really great. I learned a lot from it. And I think you're planning on actually opening one of those up to the community here soon, right?
Exactly. Yeah. On the 27th, we're going to be hosting another CFP writing workshop. So whether for HasuraCon or for other conferences or meetups that you think you might want to go out and talk about the cool stuff you've built or things you've learned by building apps with GraphQL, come hang out in the CFP workshop on April 27th. We'll go over like how to create a really strong talk proposal so that you'll get accepted and be able to tell the world about the awesome stuff you're doing.
Yeah, that's going to be really great. So I'm excited to have that as an opportunity for y'all, and I think you'll really appreciate it. 28th of April, we have community call again, and this month we actually have some really cool things for those that like to do sort of CI/CD pipeline kind of stuff. For one, we're doing a deep dive on our Hasura Ed component. We're doing a deep dive on metadata, which will be really interesting. The follow-up to that, we're going to be looking at things about doing Vercel integrations, like a brand new integration that's going to be live by then. We did a talk on that a little bit ago. The UI is updated. Everything's been worked out. There were some bugs in the previous show, but whatever. So, like, that's going to be all fixed, and it's going to be a really cool piece to see because it is really impressive to watch. We will have we'll also have a YAML generator for GitHub Actions. So if you're like doing a whole bunch of CI/CD foo, then that's definitely something you'll want to have a look at. And we have, I think that's the majority of it. We got a whole bunch of stuff and a bunch of updates to the Cloud Console, a lot of cool features. So we think you are going to love it because community call. It's fun.
Well, and the bugs are like a fun part of it, right? Because not only do you learn stuff from that, but it also shows you that you, the community, are like getting the latest, freshest stuff, which, is cutting edge, little previews sometimes. So yeah. Love the bugs.
Nothing says fresh like bugs in production. Yeah, that's for sure. And it's Friday, so
without them, would we have jobs? Like
right. Yeah.
Alrighty,
there we go. We have all learned that Anjana is a glass half full kind of person because without bugs, there's no need for jobs. So there we go.
So what bugs are we going to be running into today, Jesse?
Fantastic segue. Fantastic segue. So good. We're going to be looking at a bit of a refactor today. So when we've had the previous two shows, we're still part of our Hasura Super App e-commerce demo, where we look at and discuss essentially Hasura Actions, really kind of how they are a core piece of architecting applications with Hasura, putting your custom logic in there, because the generated piece is vital for building with your data. And so you put Hasura on top of your database, you get an API and you can build. But being able to then do the stuff that makes your app, like what makes the business logic and the custom pieces of why people choose your service, that is actually things like custom handlers or other sort of integrations that become what sets your tool apart. And so those are things that primarily happen through actions or events. And that's a piece that we've been looking at over the last couple of shows. They're all on YouTube, so have a check. Otherwise, today we're going to look at some updates to those actions, and that is what are called REST connectors. We've had a few shows on that a little bit, but the REST connectors, what they also allow us to do is remove some of the previous proxy type behavior we've had for actions to now be able to essentially bypass the need for the proxy and go straight to the source and be able to call REST endpoints directly. So we're going to do that today. We're going to have a look at the Stripe integration for the Super App. And we did a little bit of a look at it last week, but we're going to have a look at it again today and show what's happening. And we're going to refactor one of those API calls out. And more will actually walk through it because I've already done that piece of it. Just to make sure that we get the most use for our time today. And we'll kind of walk through and show how that all came together, a couple of little tips, tricks, tools along the way. And how does that sound? Does it sound like a full meal deal there?
Sounds great. Yeah, I've been enjoying learning so much about Hasura Actions and the Super App and all of this e-commerce site that we built to showcase all of these different ways that you can kind of adapt these tools to your needs, so you can use the actions to actually do the behavior that you need. So folks can go to GitHub, right, to follow along, check out the code base, poke around, create some bugs of their own, or file issues to tell us about the ones you found.
So let's see what we got here, and we're gonna see some soft white underbelly of the repo today. I'll tell you what. So we're gonna have a look here at what we got going on. So let's have a quick look. This is the part that we have been seeing and coming across. I mean, we sell other things on this fake demo, like glasses, right?
Ooh.
So there's more stuff than just.
I thought it was all curtains. No, just kidding.
It's curtains for you, maybe, but it's not. Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and pick out a pair of aviators today. I feel like it's aviator season. This one's even got a lot of nice, recommended, more like this product. That's
nice.
Fun.
They're bringing back Top Gun, right? So I feel like aviators are gonna have a comeback as well.
Yeah, I have been told ever since I started shaving my head that my glassware that I use for outside is much too dominant now on my face. It looks like I'm a discount Bono or something. So they told me I need to wear something different. All right, we're going to go ahead.
You better buy some fake sunglasses to adapt.
Or maybe it's like a discount Pitbull. It's probably the better example. Like, all right, we're going to go ahead and go to our cart here. We just added this to the cart. Go to checkout. So we discussed this last week. We had a couple of pieces in here. I've got some saved address information. We're going to go ahead and fill this out with some dummy data. And we're going to go ahead and put in some fake data here. You can try and con this card all you want. It is not going to get you very far in life. And I have no idea where that zip is, by the way. So if you're at that zip code, shout out. We're going to go ahead and do a pay and checkout. And then within a couple of seconds, we get the little notification, successful, placed order. One of the reasons why this was not working on the previous show, and this is actually shout out to the folks over at Stripe because their DX is fantastic. There is a webhook inside of the code base. If you look at the API directory, and that is a whole bunch of Docker stuff. If you look at the API directory here, underneath our actions, so this is metadata for Hasura. We're going to go over to the pages folder. I've been doing some debugging today. I'm going to go ahead and do the webhooks directory. There's a Stripe webhook. And this essentially is when you make a payment or an order on Stripe, what's happening there is it's supposed to call a webhook that then comes back and makes a payment over to the Hasura side. So if it works, or everything's successful, it then comes over and actually updates that order inside of Hasura using the same client to then say, okay, we're going to go ahead and update that order status as being successful. Because when we do the order process on the Hasura side, it's actually a subscription. And Hasura gives you those subscriptions for free out of the box. So we're subscribed to the order state. when that subscription comes in and we actually get a success state, it updates the client and says, hey, everything's happy. So what wasn't working last week is I wasn't aware that actually needed to be set up. I should have been aware of this, but I wasn't. And it's really cool is if you install the Stripe CLI, you can actually log in, so locally authenticate, and then you can tell Stripe to watch and forward these webhook triggers to something running on locally hosted code. So it's basically the same thing as if you were hosting this live, but it's just proxying it to your local machine saying, hey, we're watching for all of your computer, all of your account events as well. And then you can test locally. So, I mean, Stripe's just thought this stuff through for so long, and they've got such great DX. So shout out for them. But that's what you'll need to do. You'll go over to your Stripe account. You'll identify where the webhooks live. Actually, you know what? Let's just do it, huh? Let's just show where it's at.
I think that would be great. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and show it off. So we're going to go to the dashboard. And we're going to go down to the webhooks, I believe, is somewhere near here. Let's do a search for that, huh? And so what we have is... it says disconnected, but it's not actually disconnected. But it is working as we just saw. So if you go to the webhooks and then you go to add an endpoint, you can. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm incorrect there. So what you do is you log in first. So you tell. You tell. Let me make sure I'm saying this correct. Yeah, it is correct. So what you do is you go to the Stripe dashboard, and where did I set that up? Actually, now that I'm wondering where I actually configured it to have running. That's a good question. Now, well, I will show you from fresh what that would have looked like.
Sure.
But essentially, what you do is you go to Stripe, and then you say listen. And then it's like forward to, and then you give it the actual path of where your code is living. And then you say, okay, it's on local 3000. And then you give it the full directory of where you need to go. And then that is essentially the webhook behavior, but it's running locally on your machine. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So Stripe is then connecting to this place where the webhook is running. And in the webhook, whoever has set it up so that we are getting the latest kind of status back, and then can use that to do whatever, like update the client.
You would, right? And you can see here how it's called local listeners. And that's that's the key distinction here. So under webhooks, either you'd point this to something like where you have your project running for like Vercel, or wherever you're hosting this Next.js application, you post this there with the path /API/webhooks/Stripe. And that would be what you then provide here. So whatever the domain is where your project is running would be a webhook you would add here. Right. Because it's localhost and I don't actually have an open port between my computer and Stripe servers, we're going to go ahead and we just use the local CLI that creates a listener on my system, but because I've authenticated, it creates a connection between my machine and my Stripe account. And it says, okay, we're listening for anything happening on your Stripe account. And if it happens, we will forward that event to this specific API here. And that's how we're able to identify and connect this code up to be able to finish the loop of updating our orders inside of Hasura. Okay,
sure.
So we success.
Start out with the local listener for dev, and then you would just sort of put in a hosted listener once you've deployed. Okay.
Because it's a lot easier to debug and iterate on, and you can also trigger with a CLI too. It's a lot easier to debug and iterate on that locally than logging into server logs and figuring out what's going on.
Totally.
So
cool. Okay. I think I'm with you.
So let's have a look at the actions. What we've got going on here, we're going to have a look at the Stripe checkout form and do a little walkthrough here of what's going on. So essentially what happens is we have, we're bringing in our Stripe elements, the use Stripe behavior, the use element, card element, some different Stripe components. We configure those Stripe components. And then we have the checkout form that we're creating right here. So this is the React component we're working with. I'm going to go ahead and just bump this font just a tiny bit.
Great.
So we have the checkout form, and then we just kind of run through. We got the Stripe context with the use Stripe. We register some elements. Basically, I think it just creates some handlers, I'm not sure, or some refs. And then we go through with our first mutation, and that is we define a mutation, the create user address. So we're defining this as a mutation that will become callable. So this, we say use type mutation. This is a constructor for this. Again, this is the GraphQL Zeus abstraction on top of GraphQL, but it's creating this mutation statement that will then live at this function that gets exported. So this is a constructor for this GraphQL mutation. And now this would be the value, the user address would be the response value that gets assigned. The create user address is the function to call it. This is a fairly common pattern we see with the hookified world of React these days, is to do it sort of this way. Think of it as set state and state. You know?
Makes sense.
And so we follow along to the next one. We have one for orders. This is the actual creation of the order. And then we get down to this behavior here, which is the actual event handler for submitting that checkout form. So if you look at the UI again, this behavior here, pay and checkout, that part of the React, this is part of the Stripe default UI forms they give you. This pay and checkout is calling this handle submit event, which is where we actually kick off our behavior. We do a little check to make sure the Stripe's client is available. And then we say, okay, if we do some more data checks, if we don't have the address and context, we need to create the user address first. We get the address and context, and then we're able to continue down to creating the payment intent. This is a bit too zoomed in here. We're going to go ahead and zoom out. Then we scroll down to our first Stripe call. Now, I want to just make a call out to this bit of code right here.
That's what I was chuckling at. These are great comments.
Yeah, these are really great comments. Do not do this in an actual app. So it is worth calling out. I also love this one above here too. It's this is so bad, but it would take too long to refactor the hook to be parameterized. I'm awful.
I mean, who among us has not left comments somewhat like that?
Yeah.
In some code base.
These are not my comments. I know whose they are. These are not my comments.
Well, they're so they're telling us that there is something here that we definitely want to be kind of mindful of in production.
Yeah. So the reason why they're calling this out is there is a potential risk of allowing people to abuse, like setting a custom price for items they're ordering, right? So you could say, well, I like that Tesla, but I'm going to pay $10 for it by modifying the payload for the request or other kind of abusive behaviors that may occur. And so generally speaking, the better way to set this up would be to have a order event. So on the orders table, you would trigger an event and go out and actually then normalize the dollar values and everything else. Reach over to your database or to your payment provider, make the payment intent from there. And we could absolutely do that. We don't have time for refactoring all of that for this show, but we are going to talk through the process of starting that. And we're going to talk through then how what we're going to do today fits into that bigger piece of actually doing a proper refactor of how you'd go about to fix this.
Gotcha.
This is not actually bad practice in terms of any sort of data risk. This is just lazy coding, which we all do. So,
okay, so let's dive in.
So, anyways, the create payment intent starts with then the create payment intent action that we are exposing on our API. We'll have a look at that action. So this is the create payment intent. Well, if that succeeds, then we can take the result and we then do we pass it into a confirm the payment Stripe call directly from our client. and moving on down. So if you haven't seen it yet, we've got two clients. We've got Stripe clients locally. We've got the Hasura client here locally as well. So we're basically managing two different clients, different states, and trying to orchestrate them. A lot of waiting for the other things to make sure that nothing is like breaking in our async code flow. So while this works, and this is how we've been writing code for quite a while, there are better ways. And so let's have a look at what we can actually do here. So at the moment, we're going to start with a refactor here and just kind of go through the process to show off how a REST connector helps us refactor. And then we're going to talk about how that piece fits into the bigger picture overall.
Awesome.
So we're going to take this specific one here, the create payment intent, which is this one right here. Okay, we're going to actually refactor this away into a direct call to Stripe, but through the Hasura API. We don't want to just say, you know what, let's just call this directly from the front end, for one, because you got some security issues there. But we want to say, what if we could actually just expose this Stripe behavior directly on our API without actually having to write proxy code? Because our proxy code for this actually lives here. So this is the actual Stripe SDK call, where we do stripe.payments.create, and then we pass in the amount, the currency, and then we get back the client secret, which is sort of the ASN, if you will, from Stripe's ecosystem that comes back, and we can say, this is what we're going to use to identify this payment request going forward.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
Yeah,
we're going to get rid of this.
Yeah, okay. Yay,
so,
love deleting code.
Yeah, let's delete code. So let's have a look where this action's getting defined. We're going to go over to our Hasura instance, and we're going to go look at our actions here. And this is where the action was initially created, the create payment intent action. So here's the mutation, create payment intent. We have a parameters input, and that parameters input is taking in payment amount, which is a float. And then we also are returning then the client secret, and we're doing we've parameterized the Next.js URL, which is handy, and then we have the API actions, create payment intent, and that's it.
Okay.
So pretty straightforward. But go ahead.
No. So same structure as we've seen with the login actions, with the other actions we've explored on the last couple of weeks shows, right? Which folks can watch the videos for if they'd like to see how those went.
So this was the way that we had to build with actions previously, up until actually the start of this year, when we then released the REST connectors, which allow us to bypass the need for this entire proxy code that we've written inside of Next.js. Because what we're doing is we're calling an API that's calling an API. We don't need to do that. We can actually just call the API once. Okay. So to do that, we have the Stripe create payment intent. And normally I would actually be an advocate of normalizing your naming conventions, so you could then have that flexibility with which providers you're calling. So I wouldn't necessarily prepend with Stripe, but that's my personal preference.
Just so to distinguish it from the old way of doing things.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So here we have Stripe _ create payment intent, and then we're taking in a single argument called amount, and that is going to be an integer, and we're returning the Stripe payment intent. So what's happening here under the hood? Well, the object that's being returned is this one here, Stripe payment intent, and we have a look down. We can see a really big object that was typed. And then we have the payment method option. So we have a whole bunch of nested types too, right? So we have like a couple of cases you have nested. Actually, we have the payment method options, and payment method options can be of a type card, and card can have these other options underneath it. So a whole bunch of like nested GraphQL types that are defined here. And then we define all the types. So we say, okay, we're passing an amount. We don't need to define a type there because it's using one of the base types, and then it's returning the Stripe payment intent. The webhook handler, I have abstracted away Stripe URL base. So that is simply this API.stripe /version1, whatever is the canonical Stripe reference. I put that in an environment variable.
Okay.
And now I come down here and we have our first step where we actually have authorization. And we say from environment variable, Stripe secret key auth. So from there, let's have a look to see what we're actually defining at both of those endpoint or variables at. So the Stripe URL base, which is simply the API root. Mm-hmm. And then we have the Stripe secret key, which is going to be then a bearer token, which is bearer. And then the Stripe secret key, something we don't want to actually put on our client or call from our client, our front end code, because that gives them the keys to the castle. Mm-hmm. So we have the ability to access all of this here from inside of this handler, this action. So we put the authorization, we put the token here so we can keep this out of the console so we're not leaking secrets and stuff on who has access to the environment variables. Mm-hmm. And then we come down to the actual handler here, which is the post. And then we can say, well, we're calling very specifically the / payments and payment intents endpoint at Stripe. And from here, we now pass in this case, we've hard-coded a query parameter called USD, and then we are passing in that dynamic amount variable that we're calling the mutation with. So we're saying up here, whenever I pass an amount, I'm taking that body.input.amount argument, mm-hmm. and I'm using this here directly as the value to pass in at this query parameter. And we mm-hmm. can see here, we can see the actual formulated API endpoint. We can see version 1 / payment intents. The amount is being appended here from the demo context. I've created a demo context to reference what it would look like. And then we have the currency equals USD. So mm-hmm. we have we've defined our entire payload here of what it is that we want to do. If we wanted to modify the actual payload very specifically, we can modify that down here. But in this case, these normalized inputs worked just fine for what we need.
Okay. So, and this is up to us, right? These, like, if I was connecting to a different API endpoint or a different API entirely, I would just configure all of these parameters as needed. So, or even, for example, if we wanted to, let's say, implement a currency selection on the front end, and then parameterize that so that folks can change the currency that they're making these payment intents with. Is that, it's just up to us, right? It's at our discretion, and then we would just have to modify the type.
It's up to
up to the endpoint, but in terms of how we're taking, like which info we're taking from the front end and passing on through to the connector that we've set up.
The mapping is totally arbitrary.
Exactly.
As long as it matches what the endpoint is looking for, you could call it whatever you want. You could call mm-hmm. it monies or something. I don't know. Like you can do whatever you want to call that. So this is totally arbitrary. This is a mapping for how we're specifying the mutation here. And then this is where the mapping occurs, where we want to send in what it is that we're actually down here, what it is that we're actually bringing in. So we got the amount, and then we have the input amount.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then we could use this. I mean, we're using this here for Stripe, but we could use this for whatever API we wanted, right? Like we could set up a new connector for, let's say I already have. Yeah, or maybe my colleagues on a different team have some internal API that's REST based, but I like, I want GraphQL on my app over here and connect it to that. Like I could use this for whatever, right?
Yeah, there's all kinds of use cases for this. Exactly.
Awesome.
Absolutely, exactly.
Okay, but here we're trying to buy some aviators. So
we already bought them.
Okay, we're trying to keep buying different types of aviators.
We're trying to keep the developers busy so we can afford the aviators now. So what we have is we have this API now basically calling Stripe directly, but up to a certain point. So here's where we have to modify it a little bit. So with the way this works at the moment, all of these requests are application JSON, right? So that's what's being sent as the request from our server. Now, if there's anybody in the audience here who knows anything about Stripe, that ain't going to work. We need to have the X www form URL encoded, whatever order that content type header is, because I always have to look it up. We have to use that to send this request. It's not going to work like this. So we can modify that if we go to our code, and if we actually open up the actions now, which is our metadata. Let's look at the path that we take to get there. So if we go to our Hasura directory and we go to the metadata directory, which again is everything is being tracked. So when I hit save, anything here at that 9695 path, and if I hit save on anything here, it writes this metadata to this directory. And this directory, then, this is showing all of the actions that we've created up till now. And I go down, I find the one that actually was created for this use case. Let's go ahead and make that code explorer go away now. So we have the Stripe create payment intent, and we see all the default settings that we've defined. The handler, everything is the way that we defined it. And then we get the actual content type header. And here we can modify this and say that this is actually application / XWW form URL encoded. And then when that's done, we apply that metadata to our Hasura project using the CLI. It looks something kind of like, if we go to the down here, which basically something effect of Hasura metadata applied, and then you pass in any admin secret. Applies the metadata directory to the running project of Hasura that's living inside of Docker Compose in our case. And then with that running, we can just reboot the Hasura console. Now we're running back with a tracked version of Hasura that we can do whatever we want to do.
Gotcha.
So that metadata is now changed, so we can actually create payments directly at REST using the API here. So we go mutation, create payment intent amount, and we do something like 999, whatever that it's going to turn out to, because in cents. We can now start to browse down what options we would have back, and we can actually see now that we have the full typed payload coming back from Stripe's API. Because if you use the actual Stripe API with REST, you're going to get back the entire payload of all of this data, but my application actually only needs client secret. Like that's the only thing that my application needs. I don't need the whole payload that it sends back. This is the whole payload. If we look at the Stripe documentation here, if you go to the payment intents, this is the payment object. This whole thing would get sent back with every single request you make to the payment intents API. Now that's not like end of the world, but like that's excessive data. Data is expensive. Not everybody's got unlimited data packages. Like, that's true. Like, this is part of the problem that GraphQL
data is expensive. No, that's what I was chuckling at. Data is expensive.
And then there you have it, right? You get back the data that you need. You get this generated string from the Stripe endpoint, and this is literally bypassing any actions that we would need. This is just the data coming straight back to us from the Stripe API. We're not calling any proxies, nothing else, just calling the Stripe API directly by itself. Now as a method added to this endpoint, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. And so the structure of that response, we mapped in that connector definition, or where is that?
But we didn't. So there we're going to talk about a cool trick. Because what you would have to do is you would have to go into the actions here. And then we actually can look at this in metadata too, because I think it's a little bit easier to see.
Okay.
So this type here, here we go. That's the one. I'll just zoom out there a little bit. This is the payload.
Fit on the screen.
Right. So like, how much y'all want to bet that I actually typed all that by hand to represent the Stripe endpoint? No, I don't got time for that. So let me show you a cool trick. Right. I know. If I was that dorky, I would be buying like different sunglasses. That is for sure. So let me show you how that works. And this is really cool because I'm a super lazy dev and I think this is fantastic. Yay, I take this entire object. Yeah. I take this whole object here. which is typed, right? It's got type hinting in there already in most cases. And so what we can do is we go up to our, and there may be cases where we can actually get a better example to work with. But if we go to transform.tools, which is a fantastic utility Swiss Army knife of things for developers, we're going to do JSON to GraphQL.
Ooh.
We paste that JSON object in there, and then it actually gives us the schema definition for us. Like,
wow.
totally
Okay.
free,
Very
which is
handy.
really cool. Very cool.
handy.
Yeah. So and you can see that we have the connected types automatically, the nested behaviors, everything else that you would expect to see here in this case. So
cool. So transform.tools. All right. Definitely a handy Swiss Army knife, as you said. That is.
And if you are a React developer and you do a lot of copy pasta, then HTML to JSX is also a really good one to know. Because then you get the class name like conversions and everything else, right? Because that's cool stuff. So shout out to transform.tools, but a lot of great utilities in here to help. I mean, you got the JSON YAML. If you wanted to do stuff like for metadata, for example, I mean, you could do all kinds of cool stuff here. So yeah, shout out to them. Pretty cool stuff.
Awesome.
Anyways, so with those types then that we're able to bring in and we define those inside of our actions, this actions GraphQL is the exact same one that we saw here underneath the action definition.
Okay.
This is the same one that we pass in here, and it becomes part of the global spec. So that document is this global spec here. That gets our annotated or additional schema that gets merged into the schema that we ship with our generated schema. So everything in here now becomes available on our endpoint. Now,
awesome.
Yeah. Do you have a comment or?
I mean, this is really cool, right? This is like we have the advantages of GraphQL with, like, as you said, only getting back the data that you need, but we can basically use whatever REST API we want and pretend essentially that it's like giving us a GraphQL API. And it's part of our kind of unified, like we have all of this other behavior happening in this one app, all defined in that metadata, right? So it's kind of like one-stop shop.
Yeah. And so that's what we're going to see next here. And as we need to now expose this to our client, where we can now actually call that Stripe endpoint that has the protected headers, that has everything else. My server is using that protected header and everything and doing the authenticated scopes, like that secret that we added. I can't be exposing that to my front end. But in this case, I can now call that directly. I can call the Stripe endpoint directly through Hasura as my gateway, if you will, but gateway is a dirty word here. We don't like to say it very often. So
portal
to developer magical experiences. Yeah.
I don't know.
So let's see how we do that. So first, what we have to do, naming is hard. First, what you have to do is we have to actually make this available to my user, my user. That's like authenticated, right? So we logged in to be able to check out. So I have to make this available to that role. So under the permissions tab, I come down here and I just turn it on with a pencil. And in this case, I've already done it, but I can either remove it or I can cancel in this case. But if this was something that was only available for my site admin role, I could turn it on here. I mean, they should actually be allowed to do it as well. So we'll go ahead and say site admins have access. And then we have the ability to say, is this something that would be available for fully unauthenticated users? We're not going to do that in this case, but we could. Like, you could totally create payment intents and you don't have to worry about the protected scope, because in this case, it's available. Like, it's something that we've protected behind the Hasura wall. So we've got an action that is in fact calling Stripe directly, no proxy, calling Stripe directly, and it is available to my user. Now we get to start to ship this around to places, and we get to bring this over to the Hasura front end. And what's cool about this is, because I'm using, in this case, the Stripe REST endpoint, but like I now actually get to just stick with using my GraphQL client on whichever service I want to use. I don't have to try to now figure out what is the Stripe SDK for Alexa, or what is the Stripe SDK for my mobile clients, or whatever else, I can actually now be using one SDK if it's GraphQL or fetch libraries, whatever else I want to use. I can clean up my code quite a bit when I'm putting these direct calls inside of my REST and inside of my GraphQL API. I don't have to be merging and mixing these different clients together. So that's part of the story here.
Gotcha. Cool. So the idea is that we'll be able to kind of lighten our load as we're building this front end. Fewer things to think about means fewer things to get caught up on, right? Means
and that's exactly it. Because I was initially, and this is a true story. So when I was trying to figure this out, I was getting my head around why wasn't this working initially, because we had the bug from last week where it was a problem with the webhook. And I was trying to get it to work, and I'm messing around with the client. What's in scope? I'm like, oh, this is really getting frustrating. And then I was like, well, you know what? How about I just put this inside of like Hasura, like first, and prove that I have a working API call from my endpoint, and then I can actually debug from there. And so just isolating that call down to a known scope, I was able to say, well, in this case, like I was able to figure it out quickly and be able to get the problem solved because I was able to solve it as an isolated problem, as a small piece, as opposed to this whole bigger picture. So
awesome.
Inside here, we're going to go ahead and generate our client. So we actually have access to this new method. So I'm going to go ahead and bring open a new terminal window here. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and run this, have it actually previously in my code, I thought, but there it is. Yarn run generate GQL client. That is this script, which is doing the Zeus CLI on my local endpoint, and it is going to generate the local TypeScript CLI for my GraphQL client. That's the whole thing we've been working with and seeing the funny ways of things that are named that don't look like GraphQL, but are. That's the Zeus library. And we generate that. So it looks at the GraphQL endpoint and says, hey, you now have new options available on this CLI, on this API. I'm going to give you a TypeScript endpoint to be able to work with that. And so that's what's really cool here is we get to generate tooling that gives us type safety agreement between our API and our front end.
Got it. Types for the win.
Types for the win. So let's talk about some refactor here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to close down this terminal here. And so from here, we're going to look to see where we're actually calling that method here. And in this case, it is the create payment intent that is calling the create payment intent mutation. So in our case, we're going to be able to actually bypass all of this code and delete the entire action and be able to go direct. So we're going to go ahead and come down here. And we're going to start with our type mutation handler, which we'll define up here. And we're just going to copy one of these because we should be able to just use basically the same bit of code that we already have. So in this case, we're just going to add a new one here called the, we'll call this create Stripe payment. And in this case, we'll call this Stripe payment. Okay. And so we'll do the use type mutation method, and that allows us now to be able to use this code directly. So we're going to go ahead and gut this code out, which in our case, we're going to use Stripe create payment intent. We can see that the typing is already there. And so then this is going to be, according to the Zeus format, inputs are, it's an array when you have input arguments, and the first object is going to be the input arguments, and the second one is going to be the selected fields. So input arguments, in this case, we have amount. And we're going to parameterize that. And I have to remember how we do variables with Zeus. We're going to just put in, we're going to hard code it for the moment.
Okay.
And then we're going to do the actual selected fields, which in this case is going to be the client secret. We can see that it's already giving us the type hinting, saying that that's what we want, which it is. And we have to say Boolean true, so that's a field we want.
Okay.
And side trip, this is why this is cool with Zeus, is because if we had a situation where we said something kind of like conditional, when it's true, return true, when it's false, return false, then we could actually also selectively write one query, but in different conditions, ask for or not ask for different fields.
Gotcha.
But in this case, we always want to get that one, so we're going to go ahead and say true.
Okay.
And we have that basically done. I want to say that parameterization is actually just down here. Yeah. We'll look at that. We'll refactor that again in another step, but I'm pretty sure it's the variables is a third field, and then you use a string interpolation up here. We're not going to get too derailed at the moment into Zeus land. We're going to just demonstrate the parts that are intended to work, and then we'll get through that. All right, so we have this this method now. We can come down here to where we're calling this API here, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just remove this part because we're getting rid of it from the front end. And we're going to go ahead and call the await here. So we're going to say const and I want to say that is it data? I don't think it is. It is. Let's have a look at the method for creating the address. Because I want to say that the order object. Well, let's have a look here. So when you do place order, what's returned? So the return is. Looks like I think it's just returning the promise. Oh, well, I think we just need data in this case, so we'll just grab data off of it.
Okay.
And then so data and errors, and it's because I'm redeclaring it. So we will say not reading it directly off. We will say that this is the payment intent response.
I think we're gonna
payment correct. And then we can go ahead and actually it's going to give us the same response back. We can actually just do it this way. So we're going to the data object coming off is going to be not this one, it's going to be this one here. So we can just read this directly off of that object. So we'll just do like that. Okay. Now it should be saying that it probably doesn't read it. What's it say that the response is on that? Let's have a look at the typing here.
Yeah.
Let's go up to here. We have the
So what we're trying to do though is we're just trying to like replace what we had before, where we had to kind of manually talk to the API ourselves and process that back. We're trying to now match this to the response that's going to come back pass through Hasura via the connector. Is that right? Or have I missed a step?
That is totally right. Yeah. So here, this is the response that it's coming back with. That is on the object. So it's probably because it is a async function. What I'm just was confused by. So here we have the use type mutation. We had the place order.
Mm-hmm.
The order is never being used here, which is why I was just kind of confused about the actual shape of this. This is SDK stuff, right? This is where just wondering what the way Zeus is returning this. I was trying to get a reference to how the other method was using it. In this case, we looked at, for example, place order. This is the function that is coming off.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the response of that, for example, should be insert order one. So if we look to see where this is being used, it's picking off data, in this case, data and errors, as opposed to the thing that we were just talking about. So what we'll do is we will assume that these exist on our object, and we're just going to pick them off ourselves using this approach here. So we're going to go ahead and just say this is the payment intent. This is an object, and on that object we expect to find data as an operational keyword. So we can go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and comment out this code for now.
Okay.
And what we're going to do is go down to now where we need to use the client secret, which is down here. And so now we can say something like data dot this. And this is probably going to say that it's not going to be client secret. So this, in theory, is a full replica of what we had before. So let's go and have a quick check.
Gotcha. Just for my general knowledge, is there a, between this camel casing and this snake casing with the underscores, are we indicating different types of data coming back, or is this just?
No, that's a fantastic question, because I hated it when I was writing it. So I'm a JavaScript dev, so I camel case everything.
Mm-hmm.
The Stripe API generally followed a was this Python case or snake case, and so in this case, trying to match a little more directly to what the API that I'm calling is, because the developer would then look up what the docs say and then see things maybe differently and go, what's going on there?
Gotcha.
So I just tried to follow the specific endpoint that I was following. I try to follow that convention, except for when it comes to calling the method, because in that case we'd already had a bunch of camel casing, and so the root level fields were camel case that I was exposing to my developer, but then the fields were snake case, and
I get it. Yeah, cool. Glad I asked. That makes sense.
Yeah. And that's exactly, those are the great questions. So here we have things set up now. So in theory, we can actually attempt to process another workflow, where if we now try to purchase these again, for example. 0131. That's a 1, 2, 3. Okay.
If anybody knows where these
where
these zip codes are, would love to know.
And it works.
It works.
So what that allows us to do then is we can get back to our code, and we can say we're going to delete all of this.
Yay! Deleting. Huzzah!
You can save that. And we're going to go to our actions. It's the metadata here. We're going to go to our actions, wherever they may be. Pages.
Gotcha. API.
Actions.
Actions.
Create payment intent.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to just drop that entire action.
Love deleting stuff.
And then we're going to go to our library here. And we're going to go to actions here. We're going to go to the create payment intent action.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to delete that action.
Boom.
I have to write it.
Now, so a question around Hasura metadata. So when we do stuff in the console here, it gets saved as metadata. Does the reverse also hold true?
When we delete things?
Like when we make changes to the metadata, does it then populate the UI here in this?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
So I'm just making sure that I've removed everything. Payment intent, client secret. Okay. So those are the last of the pieces that we don't need. And now we should be able to go and check our metadata here. So the one case where maybe didn't do it is on the actual input types. Well, we'll look here. So if we look for a search for create payment intent, you can see there's only the one instance, which is the Stripe one here. And if we go now to the actions.graphql, we can see this one here. I'm just going to make sure that nothing else is actually needing that. So payment method. Well, Stripe payment method I don't want to delete. So what was the one that I was looking for? I was looking for payment
intent.
I think the one that I deleted is actually deleted. Yeah, they're just mine, the Stripe ones. Great. So yeah.
And then, as you said before, we could also, like, now that we don't have to to sort of disambiguate between the original payment intent, create payment intent, and the Stripe-based create payment intent, or the new one using our REST connectors, we could remove that Stripe prefix and make this more generic so that later, if we want to swap out a different provider, or I don't know, maybe we have some other endpoint that we have to hit to kind of generate that payment intent or something like that, we could always change that piece out. Is that right?
Let's do it. One more refactor. All right, so we're going to go ahead and hop back over to the editor here. We're going to go, actually, I'm not going to do it here. And we'll talk about the reverse metadata. The reason why I'm not going to do it here is when I save this here, it will overwrite the XWW form URL encoded thing that I had set up in the metadata. And so I don't want this overriding my metadata changes because the console doesn't yet support it. It is coming very soon. But so we go here inside of the actions YAML here. We look for our Stripe underscore. We're going to go ahead and say create payment intent. We're going to allow that to exist as that. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and hit save. I'm going to go over to my actions. I'm going to go ahead and look for the Stripe. We're going to go ahead and change this root level name to this, which should give us everything that we need there. What we're going to do now is apply that metadata back to our console. And we can just show what we're looking at. So we're expecting when we refresh the page that this will becomes just create payment intent. So let's go ahead and refresh that.
Metadata apply.
And then we're going to start the console again.
Cool.
You don't need to start the console. This is just for tracking metadata changes. I just make it as a habit of good code or good Hasura sanitation work. If I refresh the page now, we can see that we have create payment intent. We've no longer had the Stripe prefix. This is another Stripe one that was in progress. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool.
And then we have to do one more piece though, because we've just changed our schema. So we have to come back over into our code. And we're going to go ahead and generate the client because we've changed the names, which means we now have a type error over here. And we can say now that it's going to complain about us having the stripe prefix here. So now it actually is going to be up here where we defined it.
Mm-hmm.
Where did we define it? No. Come on. Kind of bouncing around on me a little bit.
Now that's
this is Zeus now. Yeah.
Doing this. Okay.
So in this case, it has not yet updated the awareness of the change. This could just be my machine is a bit slow.
Okay. So payment amount. I wonder. It seems like it's still got the old create payment intent somehow.
It might actually be. That's a good call. If we just go up to our generated code, we go to the generated folder. I think it's utils generated.
Gotcha. Okay.
We're going to just drop that file, regenerate.
Okay. And that's what's running this. It's creating. Okay. And now, no, still unhappy.
So let's see why.
Somewhere seems like we haven't updated a reference or something.
So it's saying it's not assignable to type params payment amount number, which that is the one that was from before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's still seeing the create payment intent as the old one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think if there's any other place to refresh this. Let's see, we deleted the one. Am I generating any other types? The other possibility is potentially rebooting that Docker container to see if it'll lose any sort of memory of what it was looking at before. Let's restart the Docker container for our front end.
Okay.
And we go back here. I may have to regenerate again, but it looks like maybe it got happy after I refreshed the container. So it did, yeah. Mm-hmm. So now it's back to expecting what it expects. We have one bug here, though, now. We have to come down here because we were reading from the underscore prefix. We can see it right there. And dropping that, we now have happy code, except for, I guess, there's something down here. Oh, yeah, a bad React icon library. And yeah. And we've just refactored our entire API back to a normalized name, given our front-end client everything that it needs, and that's how it works.
Look at that. And the aviators are on their way.
Aviators are on their way twice, I think. Yeah.
And they only cost $99,000.
Yeah, we paid a lot for those aviators. Yeah. We could look at, I don't think we have the time for it today. We could look at these Zeus parameters.
Yeah. Now, but if folks were, building their own system here, they don't necessarily have to be using Zeus to be taking advantage of this.
Not at all. Not at all. This is just the library we'd chosen to create it with. I don't even know if we would do it again. There's other libraries since then that we like, but yeah. Cool. I will say they updated the docs though, so that is actually something. So that's worth having a look at now, because before that was the docs were not awesome. So that's how you do variables there. So you pass in the third option. You pass in the string, and then up here you use this kind of funny interpolation of the variable from down below. So for those that were curious.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, cool.
You don't pay $9,000 for aviators.
Awesome. Well, okay, so we covered a lot of ground though, because we started out, we had this kind of our own webhook that we had implemented to talk to Stripe directly from passing on, whatever payload we need to. And we replaced that with a Hasura action that directly connects to the Stripe API, so that all we have to talk to is Hasura, our backend there, and then everything is transformed and mapped to the Stripe REST API as we need it to be. We specify what data we want to get back, so we don't get that whole huge response payload. And we can then like refactor, delete a bunch of our code that we had before, which is great because less code means less surface area for problems. And now we made it more generic so that we can later, if we want to swap out on the back end, swap out what's happening with what endpoint it's talking to, or how it's transforming those payloads, then we can do that. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Ultimately, we refactored an action into a REST connector. So it was already an action that was just proxying over to the Stripe API. So it was still an action, but we did remove that entire bit of code that somebody has to maintain. Frankly, it's code that could cost you if you had a lot of behavior, a lot of action on that. You're talking about a secondary service versus serverless functions. I mean, it's a good value for the money, but like, it is still code running on another server that you have to pay for and maintain and make stability reports for. But if somebody says, okay, I'm taking 3 dependencies and cutting them down to 2, that's a win.
Yeah. Awesome. This is really cool.
Yeah. So that wraps it for today. If you have any questions, I'm sure we answered them all, but you can feel free to hit them in chat. And with that being said, we're going to wrap it up for today. One of these days, I want to make Anjana do the talking during the actual yeah, that was fun today.
Yeah, no, this is great. I don't know if my video is having a little moment here, but this has been great. I am certainly learning a lot. So thank you for the walkthroughs, and I am really excited that we now have saved ourselves a little effort and maybe a few pennies, because they all add up to more aviators. So. So, all right. Yeah. Thanks so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you next time. I think our next show though is going to be live, right? We're going to be doing it again.
It'll be live. It'll be a good one.
To be live. Yeah. So we're going to be talking next Tuesday about a unified GraphQL API. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was on the whole picture, but
awesome. We're going to kind of pull this all together.
Check out /community, and you will find the data and API show complete listings on everything coming up, and you will know more than we do.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah. Bye.